Here I see you, and I see the beautiful building you're in front of. Your window is more impressive than mine. Okay, and I see now I have to, what do I need to turn on? It looks like the video is on, the microphone is on, everything.
Yeah, everything looks perfect. So you just need to share the presentation and we can start.
Okay, and you'll introduce me, and then I'll talk a little bit about my role as a co-founder of RAU and our hopes for this.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So I will start speaking Russian.
Okay. Tell me when I should share the slides. You'll let me know when to turn on the slides.
Sure, Professor. Okay.
Okay, great. So I'm gonna. Should I hang up on this phone right for now? And
No. You just need to switch off the mic.
Okay. Okay, I've muted the mic on there.
Great, thanks. Добрый вечер всем еще раз. Приветствуем вас на нашем вебинаре, посвященном инновационному процессу, который проведет Берри Янгер, профессор Бостонского университета, почетный профессор. Он также преподает в Массачусетском технологическом институте и в ряде других вузов, которые занимают топовые строчки в мировых рейтингах университетов. Что хочется сказать в начале. Инновационный процесс в России часто описывается не совсем детально, не со всех сторон. Часто люди описывают научно-исследовательские опытно-конструкторские разработки, освещают вопросы интеллектуальной собственности, но очень мало в российской литературе посвящается внимание инновационным бизнес-моделям, подрывным технологиям, маркетингу, ориентации на потребителей и так далее. В Америке, в Соединенных Штатах Америки теория инноваций развита очень сильно развиты бизнес-процессы, инвестирование, появляется огромное количество стартапов, которые быстро набирают обороты, и мы видим, как много их сейчас появляется в топовых строчках компаний. Вот буквально Uber, никто не слышал о нем еще буквально 5 лет назад, Lyft, Airbnb. И в то же самое время огромное количество компаний от этих деструктивных технологий теряют свою преимущество. Например, Kodak 6 лет назад обанкротился, хотя имел более 400 ключевых патентов в сфере инноваций, цифровой видеосъемки и так далее, но недооценил потребности клиента и очень быстро обанкротился. Что хочется сказать о профессоре Янгере? Он живет в Кембридже, штат Массачусетс. Лично знаком с профессором Клейтоном Кристенсеном, который преподает также в Гарварде инновации и является главным профессором на сегодняшний день по теории инноваций. Они лично знакомы, поэтому сегодняшний опыт является очень ценным. Задавайте обязательно вопросы по ходу сессии, мы для вас их переведем, и профессор сможет осветить какие-то моменты. В течение этого небольшого вебинара мы хотим показать, на что будут похожи курсы в РАУ университете и на что будет похож конкретно курс по инновациям. В этом курсе освещается очень много важных моментов, которые мало освещены в российской литературе. Это и ценообразование, и построение инновационных бизнес-моделей, и рыночные правила, и клиентоориентированный подход, и sharing economy. Этот термин, некоторые термины профессор будет называть, они могут быть мало понятны, потому что требуют дополнительного разъяснения. Я просто освещу некоторые из них, чтобы вам было понятно. Sharing economy – это экономика совместного потребления. То есть мы видим примеры ее в Uber, в Яндекс.Такси, когда компания не владеет основными средствами, но при этом имеет высокую маржинальность. Будут освещены также партнерства, value networks, это то, на что компании обращают свой фокус, то есть они могут обращать внимание на новые требования потребителей, а могут обращать внимание на свои старые бизнес-процессы и очень быстро банкротиться, как, например, Kodak. Будут рассмотрены ловушки для стартапов, такие понятия, как Srossing the Shasm, это вот именно про ловушки, на что необходимо сфокусировать внимание молодым компаниям, чтобы не обанкротиться. Shifting basis of competition, это о том, как правильно вести себя в очень конкурентной среде. минимально жизнеспособный продукт, minimum viable product, discovery-driven planning, то есть стратегическое планирование компании, ориентированное на новые разработки и исследования, lean startup и так далее, и так далее. Хочу представить профессора Берри Янгера. Это почетный профессор по инновациям, член Совета междисциплинарного исследовательского факультета Photonics, Совета по коммерциализации исследований в Бостонского Университета. Ранее он входил также в состав административных наук Metropolitan College. В настоящее время преподает в Бостонском университете, также вел лекции в Массачусетском технологическом институте, в Китайской академии общественных наук, университете Сунь Яцена и других университетах. Занимал должность заведующего кафедрой науки и техники Metropolitan College Boston University, был исполнительным директором Центра управления проектами, а также членом комитета по патентному надзору Бостонского университета. Профессор Янгер получил 2 высших образования в Массачусетском технологическом институте. Далее защитил докторскую степень в Гарварде. Доктор Янгер является экспертом по коммерциализации технологий, стратегиям роста и бизнес-моделированию. Основал множество компаний и участвовал в них как генеральный директор. Некоторые из них, в частности, 3 из них были проданы более чем за $50 миллионов, а Color Kinetics был продан за $791 миллион Philips'у в 2007 году. Также профессор Янгер занимает должности в различных компаниях, которые занимаются биотехнологиями, интернет-технологиями, химическим производством и даже строительством. У меня здесь огромный лист этих компаний, я могу перечислить несколько: Mercury Computer Systems Incorporation, Lookin Engineering Incorporation, DataCube Incorporation, Bookham Technologies Incorporation, Marketware Corporation, Aconcagua Capital Group, BioVentures Investors Ltd. Limited, Miveo.com Incorporation, Color Kinetics, US Energy Solutions и так далее, и так далее. В настоящее время доктор Янгер является партнером и основателем 2 венчурных фирм. Профессор Берри Янгер разрабатывал специальные академические программы в сфере технологических инноваций, маркетинга и предпринимательства для перспективных норвежских и южнокорейских студентов, отобранных на национальном уровне. Доктор Янгер также ранее работал в американском правительстве, в администрации президента в качестве старшего советника по науке и технологиям, а также в национальной целевой группе по промышленным инновациям. В этой роли он участвовал в законодательной деятельности, в частности, разработке закона США об инновациях в сегменте малого бизнеса и закона Бейхдоула. В настоящее время профессор Янгер занимается исследованиями инноваций в Тайване и Китае, помимо Соединенных Штатов Америки, и взаимодействует с национальными институтами. Берри Янгер является соучредителем и почетным председателем MIT Enterprise Forum, обладателем многочисленных наград в области преподавания и исследований, включая премии Лабделла, премии Винсента Фулмера, Тайваньской национальной премии, премии фонда Бодман, премии Конгресса Международной ассоциации развития менеджмента и других. Как почетный профессор, доктор Янгер продолжает преподавать курсы в Бостонском университете и Metropolitan College. С этого момента лекция пойдет на английском языке, поэтому обязательно включайте субтитры на русском в правом нижнем углу. Professor, you can share your presentation and kindly take the floor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Let me put the slide first in front of us. Okay. I need to get this in front of me. Just 1 second. I get the right version. Here we go. Okay, I hope this is showing. Okay. First of all, welcome everyone.
Professor, it's still not showing.
It's not showing. I'm not sure what I need to.
If you want, I can share the presentation and
no, it'd be easier if I do it. But let me go back to Skype for Business and see what I have to do. Just 1 second, and can we? I can't get the controls here. I'm trying to get back into, so I can unshare and then share again.
You can use my slides. I think you can do
okay.
This.
Okay, if you want. I don't know if I'll be able to move them if you're sharing it. So how about we, is there a way we can get back to, it's still not showing, huh? I see you, but let's see if I can get back to Skype here. Okay, I think this will work now. Is it showing now?
Yes.
Okay, it's showing now, and I think this is as good as we'll get. Just 1 second. Let me. There. Okay, that's all I needed. Now let me just see if I can move the slides back and forth. That's great. Thank you. First of all, thank you, everybody. We had to turn around the computer because it was too bright a sunny day here behind me. So now I'm facing the interior wall, and I can see what a beautiful. It's still beautiful and out right now in Moscow. It looks like. So first of all, I appreciate the kind remarks that were made beforehand. I don't speak Russian right now. I did take Russian in school, but I've forgotten most of it. I apologize. I do remember we learned in the old-fashioned days when you said to everybody, "Господин," and I guess that isn't the case now. No, not everybody is a lord. It's a little less formal. So I would only embarrass myself if I tried to use the Russian I learned 40 years ago. First of all, I wanted to say that this is an experiment we're doing today. We're a whole new. I'm one of the co-founders of RAU and its American counterpart, Flint Fitzgerald University. And behind me are many people from education here who are interested in new experiments for how to reach Russia and CIS and how to share learning from both sides and technology from both sides. So some of the things we're working on, like making the technology, for example, right now I won't be able to show videos today in the class, but we will eventually. We're looking at all sorts of experiments here. Professor Dr. Vadim is also a former student of mine in management, and he's also Dr. Vadim is also a distinguished physicist as well as a management graduate. He's in the area of electromagnetics, which is something we both share interest in advanced wireless radio technology. And using electromagnetics to make better antennas for that. Our goals, as I mentioned before I get into my presentation, our goals are to have, and I don't know how much of this Dr. Vadim said in his earlier remark in Russian, but our goal here is certainly to have a variety of educational undertakings, the ability to do things straight online, synchronous, or like we are today, or asynchronous online courses that people do at their leisure. We're trying to find the right mechanism for this. Opportunities where people can study in Russia, but be connected to American professors, both online and ultimately in person to do classes, and the ability to give people experience as part of this, a hybrid experience where they spend some time in the United States visiting venture capitalists, entrepreneurs, so forth, to get a better context for doing business in America. So all these things are in our ideas, that it's a very global world and we want to make it work that way. So forgive us if we have technical glitches today, but we're still experimenting with the right way of presenting things. We don't want to be so arrogant as to expect that everybody in Russia wants to learn English. So we're working with modern translation technologies and so forth. So all this will be a lot of flexibility. Having said that, a couple of last remarks. As Dr. Vadim mentioned, I've been a founder and or director, or usually a founding director as well, investor, all of those for, in some cases, a principal executive like chairman or president or executive vice president of a number of companies, both high tech and low tech, both in the biomedical area and in the internet software and software. And I'm still even starting a company as we speak, which will be a platform for families for families seeking surrogates and egg donors in the United States to connect with people who want to serve those roles and to give them the proper advice. So I'm still very much involved in high tech and low tech, and using the wonderful technology we have out there, particularly the internet, in both to both help industry and consumers and help medical progress. So that's a little bit of my background. But having been in a lot of companies, some have worked, some have not worked as well. Some we've succeeded, but we didn't make as much money as we wanted because we made bad decisions. The definition of how do you know a pioneer in the United States? We say, how do you, maybe in Russia too, a pioneer is someone with scars on their back. So that may sound humorous, but it's true. So part of what I do in my teaching is try to share what I've learned to be the critical things that make innovations able, which can create competitive advantage and high margins and profits and success financially, how to make those innovations work. So what I'm going to do today is just roughly go over some of the things. I can't do a 45-hour course, for example, in 1 hour, but I can tell you about some of the things we talk about in a course like that, and I'll go by, I've broken it up into what I call 5 or 6 sessions you'll see here. And Vadim, if I start running, taking too much time or need to speed up, please let me know. I'm available, but I don't know how long your audience is, so I'll keep moving. And also, if there are questions, please interrupt and let me know what those are, so I can try and best answer. Again, as this gradually gets developed, we'll be the teacher in the U.S., for example, or we hope teachers from Moscow teaching to the U.S. In either case, they'll be able to see questions. They'll be able to hear questions. Right now, we're a little awkward, but we're getting there. So let me just, I need to move it forward here. Okay, session 1. Okay, so what I do in an innovation course is I look at innovation that used to be just a small part of a company's overall strategy and is now considered coming up with new products is both for big companies or obviously for a brand new startup. It's the way for a brand new startup, it's their only way, come up with a new product that has new value, because you don't have the advantages of a big company behind you. So it's got to be in your product or service serving a new need. But also for big companies, this is the biggest part of their strategy right now. How can we get a new product or service that will extend what we're doing? We look at the most rapidly growing companies, even the Googles, the Facebooks. Most of what they're earning is not what was earning them money 4 or 5 years ago. They've changed it. They've either improved it or they've come out with entirely new product areas. So we start in a course like that with looking at what are the traditional, since it is part of, in a sense, business strategy. It's also related to entrepreneurship, since coming up with great new products is key part of how you start a business. There's other things involved in starting a business, like how do you get the right team, how do you structure the financing correct, which types of financing will hurt you in the long run, which are the best way to do it, how do you layer the early, what we call angel or small investors, risk-taking small investors with the larger money you'll never later need from institutions. All that is in entrepreneurship. But like entrepreneurship, innovators consider what's the opportunity for whatever we're proposing. So they have that very much in common. Like strategy, as I say, it's one part of strategy, and so we look at some of the classic ways of people looking at strategy. They look at the opportunities out there. They look at if we go into this field, what are the forces? Do we have control over pricing? Do we have control? Are we better than our would-be competitors? Our class looks briefly, and I say briefly, one chapter summing up all the major ideas about strategy, looking at our internal environment, our external environment, what are our strengths. And I put in here, these things are decision tools, not eye charts, or to impress. To make a pretty chart, of SWOT is not good unless you're saying, okay, we weighed this and we said we don't have the right skills, but the opportunity is so great and there's not that many competitors in here that are better than us, so we're going to go for it, but we'll have to fill in and improve and change our core competencies, add people, do things like that. So that's an example of using SWOT to make a decision, not just to make an eye chart, as we say, or to impress. We also look at some of the traditional methods like Porter 5 Force, and which looks at the power of as I said, the power of your competitors, the power of your customers, your power over your vendors. And we look at that so people are aware of it and show that it can be used occasionally, but there's the point of everything we do when we look at strategy is say, yes, this is okay, but there's a lot stronger stuff out there now, which I'll introduce in a second, to a lot stronger stuff that has been developed, stronger tools that have been developed in the specific field of innovation that help you design a business a lot more than, say, SWOT analysis or PESTLE or Porter 5 Force. PESTLE just means environment, social, technology, all those things. But there's a lot better than just making a list. There's a tool called business models, which we emphasize throughout the entire course. One of the things is also that the traditional strategic tools have largely been rebuked. The idea of Porter 5 Force, that you try to gain strength over your customers, lock them in, that you treat your vendors pretty much like crap, that you treat your customers and try to trap them. Companies have tried this and that's called in America the Roach Motel strategy. You can get in, but you can't get out. That's something used to catch insects. But a lot of companies try to make barriers to customers leaving. A lot of these have been tried, have largely failed in the last several years. Companies like General Electric, which kept fighting in the same area they were in. General Motors kept having terrible relationships with vendors, and then found that the vendors, the only way when you put a lot of pressure on them is they make poor quality. So rather than, say, Toyota, which makes partners out of their vendors and makes sure that they also have enough profit and works with them much more closely. So a lot of these have been discredited, but they're around. We do, as I say, in a moment, I'll talk to you about business definition and business models. Things like that ask very bluntly, what are the different revenue sources for this company? What are the what partners do we use to achieve this? What's our profit model? A lot more specific. I'll introduce that in a second. We do during the course use lots of examples. We use what I call cases. Cases, just like probably in Russia, the same thing in America, that people don't like to do a lot of reading. So we try to have short mini cases, short articles, not 30-page, whenever possible, not 30-page Harvard Business School or Stanford cases, but short articles that have been written, even short videos. It shows the, for example, we show a company that had a screen for wireless display of news and sports scores and stock market information on the walls of elevators. And the people started with how cool their technology was, but eventually learned through going and asking a lot of questions, trying to make sales to buildings of their product and getting turned down. And there's nothing like getting turned down to make you ask, well, what are your needs and how could I serve them better? And eventually created a complex business model where they became a media company displaying content from Wall Street Journal, TV stations, and so forth. In fact, charging those stations because they had the customers, Captivate networks in the elevators. But a complete model where they were actually giving away their technology, but making money through advertising, sharing that with the building owners, getting money from the media vendors, breaking all the rules. But we see how they create, you get an example to see how something called stakeholder analysis, which is talking to anybody who can help you or hurt you, or whose approval you need, and figuring out a deal that works for both of you. And we show that video and how that developed into a very successful company that was sold for $5 billion. It's only a short video, like 25 minutes, but it's very powerful. We look at Genzyme, a 3-page case study. And by the way, in the Captivate Networks video, you see stakeholder analysis, which is just a way of how do you derive your business model. By how do you derive what has to be, what's going to work, who gets what, who needs what product features to emphasize. For example, Captivate Networks realized they could only show advertising at the tops and bottoms and sides very discreetly in the elevators, and they could not have any audio because it would then be offensive to the people going through the elevator, and therefore the big real estate companies that own the buildings would not want it. So it's a process. We learn a process of getting out there and asking a lot of questions. That's now called stakeholder analysis. I try to break it down into more practical terms than the books might break it down. The Genzyme case study shows a company that was started in the 90s by the founders of the genetic engineering movement, Nobel Prize winners. And they wanted to come up with something after 20 years of discovering DNA and all those wonderful things. They wanted to say, how can we use this to help people's lives? And so there was a race on to develop companies. But at the time, they only knew, by the way, tell me if I'm speaking too fast. I don't hear the translation. So Vadim, or please interrupt if anything is incorrect here. But
everything is excellent.
Okay, thank you. And that so we look at how Genzyme had an impossible task if you were to use Porter 5 force, that they were the only thing that DNA work could at the time could do was very rare enzyme diseases that children had that were fatal, terrible diseases, but were called rare diseases or orphan diseases. Orphan because nobody wanted to spend the billions to develop a drug for something that was only 350 people in the United States, maybe 500 people in Russia, very small markets, which went against the whole idea of the drug industry and meant they couldn't get financing to create the business. So they heavily lobbied the United States Congress, and now this is in many countries, to create an Orphan Drug Act, which directed the insurance companies to reimburse at the cost of creating the drug, not the raw manufacturing cost. So for certain rare diseases, sometimes $300,000 a year was paid for by the government and by private insurance companies for these rare diseases. They directed our very bureaucratic FDA, Food and Drug Administration, which sometimes takes 8 years to approve a drug. They directed them to move quickly. On things that were drugs that were for orphan diseases, that either there was a drug created or children would die. So we learn about taking matters into one's own hands, getting a law created and changing, as it were, one of the Porter Five Forces, control over pricing. Suddenly they were not being paid $50 per month for customers, that for a small number of customers, for something that took $1 billion to create. Creating new drugs is very complicated. So we learn that to understand how you can change your innovative situation to make it work. We also look at its business model and see that there are stronger ways to look at things. We also I was going to show, but unfortunately, I believe Vadim has indicated that at least today we can't show videos. There's some technical things which we will get, but I use a lot of videos in class, like that Captivate Networks video. You'll see that in many cases, if there's a 25-page business school case study, and I can find in 11 minutes of video that explain what happened, I will certainly use the 11 minutes of video and use English. It's very easy now to use subtitles in English, in Russian, that sort of thing. Very easy task. So I was going to show, but just this Fortnite, a very exciting game, but we see how it was really created. One company learned from what another company did. They created a different business model where it was free, and playing it free, it was a completely valid business. You could buy anything. If you became a member, you get and paid a little bit more. You got the ability to buy things cheaper, but it was you became a member by attraction, and also they make a lot of money by selling things within the system. And learning from some of the earlier game successes, they had a business model where rather than being popular at the beginning and everybody gets bored, they kept, if any of you have played Fortnite, it's extremely hot with teenage kids and beyond, and now with adults, because they feature crazy victory dances, they feature different styles and costumes. So it's transcended just being a game for kids into something that continually changes, and that has a business model of how the revenues come in and how it keeps getting recurring revenues by people buying newer and newer, by using it and making newer and newer in-game purchases, yet the basic product being largely free for most people. So you see in that video how we think of games as just something of creativity. They are creativity, but there's a lot of hard business lessons that the really successful companies have learned. And so we start with that to really emphasize to everybody that innovation is not some model like it may have been taught 20, 30 years ago of a lone scientist in what we call an ivory tower, invents things, and then the government gives them money to build a prototype and then to start selling it, and or they try and get private investors, but they haven't dealt. Unfortunately, it doesn't work any longer because you need to understand the market context. You have to have a workable business model from the beginning, because so many products are not paid for directly, but are paid for indirectly. Like Google makes money not by selling us thing, but by advertising, just for an example. More and more products are like that they have very complicated models of where the money comes from. or they may have dual models. For example, Spotify in many companies have a what's called a freemium. That means combination of the words free and premium, which means you spend money for a subscription. So they will have a dual model where they make money on the free version by selling advertising on it, and they make money on the premium version by getting people who want special features to upgrade. And there's a lot has been learned about how to do that and not offend. You want people to be attracted to your premium version as opposed to insulted by your free version. So we see how Spotify made the mistake of saying you could only get Taylor Swift's album if you went to their free version. Taylor Swift is like a goddess here in America. I don't know if she's known in Russia, but she's a young pop singer, and it was the wrong mistake. It forced many people to go over to a competitor, Apple, which was giving it away free. So you have to be very careful. There's a lot learned. We go into that in lots of cases. Things that succeeded, things that failed. I'll just show here I say it's universally preferred. The reason people all use business models when talking to venture capitalists, when talking to investors, when talking to themselves. For example, the company I'm starting now, we need to be very clear about each of those things. And you can see there's 9 things here. Most of all, the value proposition. What are you offering people? Is it compelling? That sort of thing. The key part, is it complete, your product? For example, the Apple iPod and the iPhone, when they started adding iTunes and things like that, with partnering with the record companies, they were able to say, okay, we've not only given you a cute hardware with some cute software, but now the system is complete. We have an easy access to music you can download. Those are ways of looking at a company. Certainly the revenue streams, the cost structure, a business has to be sustainable. I won't cover everything. I'll mention also that people read a short article called "It's Official: The Competitive Advantage," the end of competitive advantage, to show that things that so many companies like Kodak, like Eli Lilly, like so many, built their business model to last for 100 years or more. And now everything changes so much, so that if you have something that's working this year, it may not be working 5 years from now. So we don't talk anymore about permanent competitive advantage. We don't talk any longer about just staying in the field you're in, even if the field is no longer any good, and just beating up everybody and trying to make money that way. Like General Electric in the United States was the classic strategy of, they were number one in all their fields, but those fields were all dying, and they got to being number one by, in large ways, having very poor relationships with their vendors, and that led to low quality and inflexibility. So what Rita McGrath says, we all say that, is nothing is forever. Find where the new areas of transient opportunities, where the new blue oceans might be. Change your whole strategic intent, whatever it requires. Like the people with the original PDAs had the best PDA going, but they came up with, but they decided that market, it was very small, and it was like as they said, junks fighting for, alcoholics fighting for at a junk dumpster to steal things, whereas they needed to go somewhere else where there's more valuable things. Or as I say, sometimes it's time to leave the party and go to another party where there's more opportunity to meet different people, and make that's, sorry for the mixed metaphor here, but we teach people to think hard about what's out there. We show an example later in the course where Kodak kept trying to win in film, when film was being overtaken by by a disruptive technology, in fact, that they had invented but didn't know what to do with digital cameras. Oddly enough, Kodak invented digital cameras and then was ultimately killed by it. Whereas its competitor, Fuji, got it that the world was changing. They were it was coming on strong in film, but said, we understand digital. And so they started making digital cameras, but made the longer term conclusion that digital cameras were not a very profitable field and that other companies had a better advantage, not profitable compared with film, which had something like 80-90% gross margins. And here's cameras that don't need film, don't need people to buy it every week or every month. And so Fuji, for reasons of a management that was less beholden to the stock market, it was tightly controlled by a small group of people in Japan, just said, let's get the hell out of this field. Let's have a bridge. We'll make digital cameras, but we'll moreover use our thin film technology to find all sorts of industrial firms. And Fuji has been growing at a rapid rate as a multi-billion-dollar company because it decided, okay, we get it. Unlike Kodak, we get it that digital cameras are the thing of the future, but we've also decided that's not the best place. That's not our best new opportunity. And so we learned to be flexible like that. My slides, unfortunately, are eye charts, and some of these are like a whole class, so I'm just going to talk that we look at innovation as it's got a huge amount of power. New things can change the world, like transistors, like LEDs, like the internet. But that because they're new, they're often not very good at first. Especially the things that are disruptive, which are a completely new way of doing things, either like LEDs, which were, after all, just an emerging quantum mechanics technology, of just like LEDs, but kind of just like chips, but doping them in a different way so that you put in a little electricity and you make quantum layers jump and you get light out of that. They were actually predicted by Einstein's work in 1904. But it took 100 years to get bright LEDs, but they were very dim at first, although they were very pretty and you could change their color with programming. You could have the color keep changing by turning off every millionth of a second certain numbers of red, green, or blue, and you could get colors, and eventually you could get white, but not at first. And so we learned there that big innovations, like, as I say, LEDs or chips or semiconductors like transistors, or so many different things can change the world, but they're not good at first. So we need to find the early markets so that at least they stay alive. There's an important, I use concepts like S-curves, meaning that a new technology, whether it's light bulbs, starts to improve quickly and then tapers off. And then eventually fluorescent lighting comes about. Is really crappy, not very good. I'm using direct language here. Is not very good at the very beginning. We call that its trajectory of performance. It quickly gets much better and then levels off until something even better comes. So we learned how do you manage that? You have to, you're in a big company which often doesn't like your new technology because it's not as good as their mainstream customers want. Those are the ones that make them the big profits. So you have to dig around at the edges, find little niches. For example, Color Kinetics, of which I was a founding director and investor. Color Kinetics wanted to combine LEDs to make lighting systems for lighting interior buildings and so forth. They quickly found that it wasn't competitive for things like, at the time, around 2000, wasn't competitive, although they knew it would eventually be much, much brighter, much, much cheaper, beautiful white. It would completely replace regular lighting like it has now done in the last few years for all new buildings. But we had to find something, or else, in this case, the venture capitalists would what we call pull the plug, or or dilute the company's ownership as punishment for not hitting the financial results that we had claimed. Everybody makes claims. Well, when you don't make them, the venture capitalists will punish you by burning you out, diluting you, all those things, which means they put in more money, hopefully, but at a much worse valuation for the company. And so take more and more of the ownership and the financial gain from the founders and the early shareholders. So you have to be aware of how do you create some immediate success. How do you find, in our case, we found that clubs where people drink, dance, things like that, were very interested in fact the color and the excitement, and they were mostly at night. So even the dimness made the lights go a long way, and the change in colors made them very exciting. We learned how to make those decisions, what criteria to emphasize when you're looking for early customers. It's the same thing with big companies, but with big companies like Kodak, you also have people inside the company who block you. And again, there too, you have to have ridiculous financial expectations. Like in some big companies, they have developed a culture like we must produce 100 million in revenues by the end of 2 years. That's like telling that's not the way small companies and new technologies develop, because they're still trying to improve their performance. They're still trying to learn how to manufacture better, all those things, and they're still having to pick small niche markets. And yet those strong financial expectations can kill a company. We look at numerous cases where companies have killed really good technologies that would have a future, but the people managing the innovation didn't know how to get immediate respect in the organization, how to deal with its financial expectations, how to get some early sales that said, yes, we're not producing the numbers you want, but we're not standing here paralyzed. We're getting some early sales from early niche markets. They call that a value network, but it constitutes the culture of the organization, its expectations, its reward systems, even its existing way of doing things. For example, the person who in 1974, the inventor inside Kodak, who said, guess what, I've created this great new way of digital photography. It's eventually going to be really great, and it makes cameras that don't need their film replaced. And people said, are you out of your, they used a few obscene words I won't use here, but are you out of your, I'll just say, blanking mind? That's how we make money here. Shut up, go back to the lab, and don't ever tell your family about this, and don't tell the directors, because it would scare the hell out of them. Because the company made its money through selling film, lots of film. They had optimized on, the founders were long gone for 100 years at Kodak, and the people in charge had a very accounting sort of thing. Let's keep cutting costs and making more profits. So they were very good at making film, but missing the big picture. But we can see how that happens. I, in fact, bring in a guest speaker, 2 former students of mine who were the 3rd generation of their family to work at Kodak, and talk about the long, painful, slow death of Kodak. And we learn new tools. The course starts, as you can see, with depressing stories like how Hewlett-Packard blew its Kitty Hawk little mini hard drive because they used the wrong process to find early customers, and the company killed it. And we look at Kodak, and in a moment we look at Eli Lilly, how they blew a lot of things. We look at a few failure cases, sometimes a paper, sometimes an article, sometimes a video, as to understand the context of innovation. And innovation occurs in a process where there's a lot of politics. It's got early innovation also has market issues, because even if you're a startup like Color Kinetics, nobody can use you. Nobody was going to use our lighting for inside classrooms, inside offices, inside homes, because A, it couldn't produce white. It could only produce really colorful, changing color, which was really beautiful. but expensive, not very bright. And so we had to find out, as I mentioned, who could use it then. And so to at least find some things. So there's organizational opportunities created by exciting new innovation. It could be a business model as well as a business approach as well as a new technology. For example, a lot of people don't know, but that Uber and Airbnb and some of the companies that started around the same time as them with the same goal of creating this new way of doing things that would take existing GPS, existing databases, and create a function that create a platform that pulls everyone together and gives delightful functionality and even brings new supply into the marketplace and somewhat lower prices. All those wonderful things we like about, I presume in Russia you have the equivalents of Uber and Airbnb, but that they made a lot of mistakes in their beginning. So just like technologies, there's a period where even service models have a trajectory of performance improvement. They start, as we say in America, they start poor, sucky, to use a thing. But they get better real quickly. And if you know how to play that curve, you can get in at the beginning, serve some niches, and then get into the mainstream. We go in those concepts when we talk about something called Jeffrey Moore called Crossing the Chasm. How to go from the beginning where you get people who just want to try anything new to the big market, which is pragmatists, which are people saying, how does it help me do my job? Or how does it fit into my lifestyle? I'm not impressed by, the only reason I'm buying a smartphone, the only reason I'm using LED, because it saves me money if it either saves money or it allows me to do things. They're not buying it for it's a cool technology. So to understand that, and we have readings, I show a video about color kinetics, and I ask students, okay, talk among yourselves, which niche should we do? Should we go for chain retail stores like the Gap, or should we go for this? And we even have information. We show them that people have done a scientific study, and if a store like the Gap or Victoria's Secret uses this colorful lighting, it gets more sales. But we also saw that because they were part of big corporations, they were worried about the incremental effect on their profitability of relighting all those stores, and said, it's not that important to us. We'll do other things. It turned out to be a very poor initial market, whereas clubs and casinos have usually one dictator, very simple organizational process, not long committees and CFOs, and we're much more eager to get something that let them look better than the next casino or the next dance club. And again, they could control the light so it would be very bright. I'll be moving on here. We really emphasize all the ways that you need to know your market needs and where they are at the given time. We tell people that it's not enough that when you're thinking about, obviously, big new technologies are the ones that make money as opposed to sustaining small improvements. For example, Hewlett-Packard hoped with that mini disk to enter a whole new world. They just made giant hard disk, not even medium-sized, just giant hard disk for big computer labs with mainframe computers like IBM. So they made hard disks that were maybe 1 meter in size, if you can imagine. And here they are trying to make tiny 1.5 inch, which is like half a centimeter roughly, half a centimeter hard drives, and get into a new market, of laptops and so forth, but they didn't do it right. But you can see they had hoped to create a whole new market. LEDs were powerful, create a whole new market. Certainly semiconductors and chips led to a whole world of much faster computers than old vacuum tube and things like that. But Sony did it correctly by making a niche, by creating Walkman radios where people could get away from their families, teenagers, and listen to music on the go. And rather than trying to improve existing mainstream things like television sets and big kind of radios that people had that took up that were 5 feet tall. This was, remember, we're talking about the 1950s and 60s. So there's an art, and besides that art, there's knowing what are people wanting now. You can get stuck in what you were doing. For example, we look at Eli Lilly, where in the 1920s to the 1980s, they were all about, they licensed insulin. It was had a lot of impurities. A lot of people would get much better from insulin. It saved a lot of lives, but there are people who had violent allergic reactions to impure insulin made from pork and I think cows and sheep and variety of things, except that they made it purer and purer till it was no longer a problem. They improved the kinetics so it would go smoothly into your body. And they were still working, even in the 80s, spending $700 million on something to genetically, real cool technology to genetically engineer and synthesize human insulin. But they couldn't sell it. They also couldn't sell it because they were trying to charge, because it was more expensive to make it at 4 times the price. But consumers and their insurance companies didn't want to buy it. They said, we don't need this. So you have to understand how things change. You have to be close to your market. Christensen posits a typical thing that things go from functionality. Then when everybody's got good enough functionality, all the competitors, then people start worrying about reliability. And whoever gets more reliable quickly gets a jump on the market. Eventually to convenience, and eventually in many markets to who's got it cheapest. And then sometimes back again as people come up with really cool things, like the Apple iPhone keeps coming up, at least it has for its first 10 years, with new ways of doing it, new functionalities that would bring people back. Now, a lot of people will argue that they've run out and their innovations don't really, in functionality, aren't really important anymore. The world is going to shift to price pretty quickly. But those are what people think, that you go generally from reliability to convenience. So you need to look at and know what your market wants so you can find out exactly at the moment. When we examine Eli Lilly, we find out they weren't talking to diabetics, believe it or not, although they had maybe 400 people in their marketing. They were talking to the wrong people. They weren't talking to general practice doctors who see most diabetics. They were speaking to the chairman of endocrinology at fancy medical schools who never see the common patient, but only see the 1 in 10,000 that has a special allergy. And we're advising the wrong things to develop. And so in a lot of ways, we look at some of the methods people use, like heat maps and different things. We explore how to look at what customers are doing with your product and using that to make the next product. So, for example, the company that came up with a check writing program, what was it called? I forget its name. It's a check writing program, found out that a lot of small businesses were using it as a cheap way to balance, like flower shops and small retail business were using it as a way to do their books. And so it went from Quicken, that was the name of the program people used at home to balance their checkbooks 10, 15 years ago, was an early software. They went to QuickBooks, which is still an excellent low-cost accounting package for people who don't want to buy very expensive $1 million packages that require a whole staff just to operate them and put input into them. So they did that by watching how were their products used and making changes. Or Apple and the iPhone had, of course, one little camera in the front. Apple watched and saw that, gee, people are using that camera so much. In fact, they're turning it around backwards in a very awkward way to take pictures of themselves and others. But of course, when it's backwards, backwards, you can't see you can't pose it, see it, and say, let's put another camera on the other side. Hence they picked up selfies and made, so that's one way people learn about what they call that, what was your product hired to do. And they also gradually, people begin to look at that products, and we'll go into this more later in the course, and also in the lecture here. They look at how they begin to look at how products not only have, in terms of what I call their y-axis, their benefits, tangible things like this product does X, Y, Z, to intangible, like how it makes you feel. And so many products, I think we learned that every product is a consumer product, even a product that we think is industrial. I know that I was running a business that made circuit boards that went into the back of industrial robots and the big computers in them, and went into other medical applications as well. And one of our engineers, who came actually out of a Hollywood fashion family, it just happened, his mother was a joke writer for Joan Rivers, a very famous American comedian, so he had a sense of aesthetics, and he said, why don't we make these circuit boards black anodized aluminum, which was black was a really popular color at the same time. There was an American TV show, Miami Vice, where all the drug dealers had these black cool briefcases, black aluminum briefcases for doing crooked things, and the cops would chase them and so forth. But it was very popular, especially with young men. And the engineer told me, young men are going to make the decision to incorporate this product into the back of computers. So it'll only be seen one time. It will never be seen by the general customers of the robots, but it'll be seen by the person who makes that decision. And so we made our circuit board have cute edge connectors. Those are the little handles you put it into the back plane of a much larger computer, a mini computer. So I learned a hard lesson there. We actually did it, and we made, it was a good lesson. We were able to charge more for our product than comparable products, a lot more than it cost us to make the edges black anodized, cool looking things. That everything has, because that more in a way related to the self-image of the young 25-year-old, usually male at the time, engineer, who is recommending to his company, the robot company, let's use this special circuit board that speeds up the processing of various image recognition things. The robot needed to know where to put things, pick in place, and it needed to know if things were breaking, if there were cracks, all that. So our technological product still had you might say, a intangible portion to it, which had to do with how it looked and how it fit with the self-image maybe of that young engineer, that designs cool things. We spent a lot of time at Eli Lilly because what a mess. The corporate culture had a lot of accountants running it and saying, yes, we, and focusing, as I said, on the wrong things, like making purer and purer insulin that nobody wanted. As I say, the shifting basis of competition, it's an old case in the 1990s, but 80s and 90s, but that point, what was important in 1920 was not there. It was already solved. And realizing that what was really popular in Europe was people were having pre-measured pens, which made giving yourself insulin so much easier, measuring it and so forth. And actually Eli Lilly also developed that, introduced it in Europe, but then wouldn't introduce it in their primary market, America at the time. It wouldn't push it because their accountant said, well, you make more money on bulk insulin. But eventually, you can't tell people what they're going to want to buy because eventually the competitor, a Danish company called, I forget its name, but a Danish company came in and started selling pens in the United States and took the market away from Eli Lilly dramatically. Eli Lilly was a distant second, where they'd been a number one before that. So we learned about also some approaches of putting something out trying things, learning what their value is, completely, whether you're even that we read from a book called A Good Hard Kick in the Ass. It's actually, I'm just quoting it. I don't like to put it on paper. Don't want to offend anyone, but it's called A Good Hard Kick in the, and the chapter 9 in that book said, or kick 9 says, kick 2 says you don't know your customers as much as you think they do. And chapter 9 says big companies need to think like little companies. And we apply that. And, that Eli Lilly should have been out there revalidating. It wasn't. We ask people, if you're now the new CEO or you're interviewing for that, how would you really change how Eli Lilly does its business? We also look at Pfizer, how Pfizer introduced insulin inhalers, but didn't really show it to any customers. And it was a big, ugly. They spent $5 billion, ultimately lost $9 billion on a product they were certain was going to be a success, but never gave it to its intended customers, middle-aged managers with type 2 diabetes who had sedentary jobs, many of them managers and executives who had to use this device that looked like a drug bong. It was this big. I hope you can see that. Maybe a foot long, big thing that you had to inhale at the office and kind of look silly, and also that had damage to the lungs. And so we learned, that there's nothing like you can understand concepts, but you've got to test it with the customer. Whether it's Eli Lilly and what they thought would be a big thing for the customer, and not listening to and having poor organizational structure, so somehow the accountants were running the ship and made a bad decision, that of course a new device is going to be less profitable than your old selling of bulk insulin, where they had it's an easy to make product and they had huge profits. And so they focused on the wrong thing and not on the right thing. We continue this theme of how do you really get inside customers' heads to make sure you're developing the right products or services. This is a big theme. 20, 30 years ago, innovation was taught as how do you use good project management techniques like Gantt charts and things like that to make sure that you're doing everything simultaneously at the right thing, so we'll all come together at the end. And it was guiding the research and development, the productization, all that. Often they had products were completed and then they turned them over, what we called over-the-wall engineering, which the engineering group turned it over to software and said, write software. And then finally they turned it over the wall to the marketing and sales and say, hey, sell this. We don't do that anymore. They don't do it in engineering. We now use concurrent engineering, where all the parts, and concurrent engineering also means that concurrent marketing and sales. So you make products that people want, not products that are cool technology. Sometimes the cool technology can eventually, if you play it right, lead to a huge market. As Vadim said, we managed to, after first blowing it and trying to sell to the wrong people, like Gap or airports, big government projects that take a long time, we started selling it less elegantly, not to chain stores, but to individual restaurants, individual one-of-a-kind nightclubs. We didn't make much money, but we quickly got the sale to casinos, we showed the casinos what we'd done at what we'd done at the first nightclub, so they could visualize it as more than just like a cute little demo. I wish I'd brought it with me here, but so we were able to gradually get some customer development, not nearly as much as we would have liked, but it took what we said we would do our first year, 30 million. It took us about 7 years, but now 7 years is a lot better than never. And by that point, we were able to sell out for doing 30 millions in revenues, because it was a hot emerging field to Philips as for $791 million USD. And because my point is that, technology and technology and new models like Airbnb, a tremendous capability to create value. But just because something is really cool, like the so-called Humulin product that Eli Lilly had, which they had purchased from Genentech, and that's a whole separate story. You can look that up, how they were tricked into buying something by a threat from the venture capitalist who was on Genentech, one of the early biotech companies. But it was very, very cool technology, exciting technology to be. It was one of the first uses of DNA, recombinant DNA, but it just wasn't anything that was needed. So technology does not mean, because the technology is cool, does not mean it's going to disrupt. It may be disruptive if you play it right, or it may never be what's needed. Or Humulin is used now, but it hasn't changed the marketplace. It's just a method that the patents have expired and everybody uses in all the producers. So really, they never got back their 700 million at all. We go into, I call it into action. We look at the rest of this course. Now you heard me talking. I'm sorry, this is going to go a little longer than we thought. I hope you're willing to. But I'm willing if you're willing. We go into, from here on, we go into, okay, now you've heard about the dreadful context of innovation, the issues to be avoided. Let's look at how to do it right. So we look at some of that. You can use market research. There's cool types of market research. I don't teach a course here in market research. I teach an evening. Let's look at some novel ways. Not everybody has to do 5-point little surveys that don't get you the right information. We look at how Hyundai updated the Santa Fe model by sending its executives to its sort of hidebound executives in technology, marketing, technology, finance, production, the so-called grumpy old men who ran. I hope nobody here is a grumpy old man. Maybe I am. But they sent the executives from Korea to travel around with young American, what they called soccer moms or glamour moms. These were people who had children, were in their 30s, also had to work, so they weren't rich, but they dressed fashionably, and they said, okay, these people will reflect the sensibilities of American people. And they knew that crossover vehicles like the Santa Fe, and those are called sometimes crossover or sports utility vehicles, were perceived as ugly, and they didn't have the right features. So by kind of hanging out with the moms and with the families and seeing how people, what it's like, the mad rush to make sandwiches in the morning, have breakfast, and then pass out in the family car, pass out the sandwiches to different kids to take to school. They learned what people used it for soccer games where they needed to smoothly pack a lot of stuff in the back, and they did not want a lip in the gate. They wanted to smoothly go in. They saw that people wanted cup holders. They saw that, unlike what the engineers thought, people in America were not using Hyundai, which was sort of a family crossover vehicle. Nobody was using it to climb up steep, rocky areas. So you didn't need a very expensive, very expensive differential gears that would have added to the price substantially of the car. But what you did need is, it made it above where the market would sustain it. But instead, people wanted coffee cup holders. They wanted a pretty interior. The group that went to California visited some of the fancy hotels in Palm Springs, and the interior decorator described why I use this color or that color. And so they began to get in their heads a sense that was needed so they would understand what the young American marketing manager, who was female and not respected because she was in marketing rather than what fields that were respected by the Hyundai central management in Seoul, Korea, they began to see things from the customer's view, and if they didn't believe it directly, they believed their own eyes. We also look at, again, I don't go over, I just try to show two novel ways. I show a very short article from the Wall Street Journal about how Netflix, when they changed their strategy from being a pipe or just being a distribution channel for streaming video to saying, everybody's going to do this, we need to do something different to differentiate ourselves, we'll start to make original shows. And so what did Netflix? Netflix said, we don't need to do market research. We've got billions, literally billions or maybe trillions of data bits on all our customers. We know which shows they watch, which themes. We know how quickly they go on to repeat that show or to watch the next in that series. They know which actors they like. And so they were, and as I said, what themes. So they were able to, actually what Netflix did is it found an English show which featured called House of Lords or something like that, which focused on political corruption, sex, and greed. And they said, okay, our North American audience wants, I think, more sex or more corruption, whatever it was. And so they rewrote that and said, okay, let's, but they were guided by what the big data was saying. And so it's kind of amazing when you think that Hollywood is known for people who have this golden touch for knowing what the consumers want. And the title of that article, by the way, is giving them Netflix, giving what they want. And it talks about how House of Cards, a political show that's been enormously successful, as well as other TV shows by Netflix and everything, are beating the pros at Hollywood. And this is, frankly, Netflix, the people starting Netflix were a bunch of nerd computer programmers writing insurance software. They are not people at Hollywood, and they're certainly beating Hollywood at their game. So we see the power of some of the modern market research techniques to guide your product. And we learn also there's different types of market research. There's quick and dirty market research to validate, is there some market for what you want? And there's other types of market research where you really get deeply into trying to find out what are the right features that your product should have. And there's other types of market research for setting price levels and structure. There was a company called MarketSoft that developed, had come off successes and was developing new enterprise software. They're going to sell the executives of big banks that had to manage cross-marketing, manage cross-marketing banks that had acquired, because of a change in law, they'd acquired insurance companies, stock brokerage companies, mortgage companies. And so they want to cross-market, sell the customers of one. Let's say somebody buys a house because they just had a baby. They are also going to want to buy insurance. They may start to have a retirement account. So the idea was good, and the company very carefully interviewed all the people in marketing and had all the right features, but they forgot to interview the people, the CFO and others who decide what they'll buy. And the CFOs at the time were all moving from big $100,000 software to $200,000 software packages, so-called enterprise, to software as a service. You specify the number of people in the company you use it, you give them each a desk, and you charge monthly by the desk. The company could not recover at that time, and so with $106 million in investment, they sold off to some company that used a little bit of their software and converted it for $6 million, which is a real failure when you put in 106 and when you take out 6. So, and of course that 6 went to the investors, none of it to the founders. So when you do market research, you have to think very much, and we give examples of what are you trying to find out, because that affects what kind of tool you're going to use. But again, my idea here is to kind of wake us all up into that it's really valuable to understand where the customer is, and we saw some examples just before that. Now on the positive side, there's a way to solve that problem. Hyundai made a ton of money after they changed their car to make it more masculine looking, because that's what their customers wanted. They shifted the cab, the front of it, a little forward, gave it an angle. They put in the right features. They did not put in the wrong features. Their sales took off of that model in the U.S. Here's another horribly big thing. And I'll just say that a big part, because I cover this a little bit later, so I'm just going to say that throughout history, people have been using external resources to improve the value of their product. They've either made things cheaper or more quickly by outsourcing them to, say, to outsource the manufacturing, but you sell it. Or even in the very earliest days, they used an image of Mickey Mouse or an image of Hello Kitty to, or on the, or image of, trying to figure out what they want. I have on the next slide, I'll show you. But the Minions, that was a popular TV show. They used that on lunchboxes to give them more value to kids. So the idea of taking something and adding value, going beyond what you yourself can do, there's a lot of histories about that. I show a video called Keurig Coffee Office Systems, a traditional company right before the internet, but that's now is that their first product was directed towards offices. Later on, using these things, you put a pod in the coffee, and it's very convenient, a vacuum packed pod. It's sold for a home product now, but the way they made their initial success was selling it to office systems. They had run out of their money because the venture capitalist had said, "I wasted it on you technologists. You've never focused on the right things, and it's 10 years out, and you haven't gone to market." They brought in a new manager, and I show that. That's a case where there exists a 25-page case, but I have a 13-minute video that I call, in fact, from a session I ran at MIT, which I call 13 Minutes of Magic, and you see how outsourcing even the sales and guiding it to people who service the office coffee market, trucks that were vendors and went around from company to company giving it coffee supplies and other things. How they outsourced the making of the coffee. They didn't have to come up with their own brand. They made a deal where brands would vacuum pack in these little things. The brands made more money per ounce of coffee. It opened up a new market for them, these rare specialty brands. And Keurig had one less thing it had to worry about. It just made profits from a licensing fee. A whole bunch of things really well done. And then we proceed to asking people what sometimes doesn't work when you outsource. And people talk about their experiences where they didn't have much control, or the outsourcer did a bad job, yet people blame the company, not the vendor. Particularly if you're a popular brand. Let's say if you're a big drug company that makes and sells, and someone made your drug with some imperfections. Let's say you're a Merck or a Pfizer or one of these big companies. People are going to blame you when your brand really suffers. So there's a kind of responsibility. We begin to learn that if you're going to outsource, you're responsible for the product. We introduced them to a bigger thing, a new trend called platform business models, a business model that creates value by facilitating exchanges between two or more independent groups, usually users and producers. So you get Facebook has people who want to get this, and you have people who Facebook Google connects you to the sources of information. There's a lot of successful platforms. That's the business model that everybody's rushing into. There's a special version of it called sharing economy, where the people who do the work, and the customers are completely outsourced. You just connect them. And Airbnb and Uber, they're supposed to create new value by the fact that there's cars that haven't been, that nobody is using, or there are apartments that nobody is using. So suddenly you throw, I call it citizen drivers, not cab driver, or private apartments. You create a major new value. People get, it lowers the price. If you figure out the right business model, you can charge for that connection, all that thing as certainly as Amazon does, certainly as, more importantly, as Uber and Airbnb. They have problems with the quality control, like I talked. We look at videos in the class, about some of the horrible problems that have happened with Airbnb or Uber. And Uber and Airbnb can no longer say, well, that's not us. It doesn't work. Their lawyers have told them, well, play it safe and say you're a Craigslist. You're just innocently matching people on a bulletin board passively. And that's bad advice, because when Airbnb or Uber gets a bad reputation, they may win a lawsuit for $80,000, but they've lost billions in their market value, and their brand has lost a lot of its quality. So when a new competitor comes into that, they will no longer to be able to charge more, which is one of the advantages. If you're familiar with the whole idea of a brand, it makes for the same thing. Like Apple phones and Apple iPod and Apple, all that benefited from Apple brand. People have a general idea that brands offer you, that brands are an extra added value to all products from that company. So sight unseen, I will pay more for the brand of Apple because of the assumed far superior user experience. And sight that's one example, but sight unseen, there are many companies like that. That's what a brand is. It increases your profit, your margins. People will pay more and will also, and they've quantified the advantage of a brand to something like 20 to 30% in price, which translates to a huge difference, several hundred in profitability. And they've also,
Professor, I'm sorry to interrupt, but can we enhance a little bit the speeds of the slides? So just
sure.
maybe
Absolutely.
3-4 minutes per slide.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so
much.
I'm just going to talk a little bit more about this, and we won't quite dig in as much later. But I'm sort of paraphrasing. So we look at Airbnb, especially, we look at the problems it had and how it's learned to deal with those problems and accept that's part of their responsibility. We've looked at how major companies, when there's a new way of creating value like this, they have to have a different way to charge for what they do, often by charging not a subscription, but by a usage fee, a success fee, different ways. And also we learned that some things you can't make into a sharing economy. I know a company, Washcloth Laundry and Dry Cleaning on Demand, which found it was strongly urged by its venture capitalists, outsource everything. Let Uber do the laundry and picking up. Use existing laundries and have them do your laundry at night. And they found out they couldn't get quality control that way. There are many other companies in this field that have lost money and gotten very bad consumer app scores, like 1.8, whereas Washcloth has decided they would take it in and they would do their own drivers, and they had a much and they make more money, and the idea that you'd get it cheaper from outsourcing it was not true, and they have a 4.8 on their app. So there's a lot of complications in making sharing economy companies, and we go into that a huge amount in the course because, and in fact, we have guest speakers like the Washcloth Laundry, the CEO who's building it and now has several 100,000 customers, and talking about his dilemmas and trying to sell this radical idea to venture capitalists who keep insisting, well, why don't you make a sharing economy out of it and outsource everything? He said, because it doesn't work. And how do you explain that? Okay, we go into a lot. I'm just going to sort of summarize here that we look at the whole experience of Apple, all things Apple, and how Apple has changed things so that people really, I referred to this earlier, so that people look at what is the experience you're getting. How does it fit into your lifestyle, or if you're a business, how do things fit into your workflow? They build on previous innovations in technology. And then they call that combinatorial innovation, a creative economy. So everything in the Apple iPod and the Apple iPhone, just about everything came from other companies. They just put it together. And in Airbnb and Uber, they just put it together. There's the government of Taiwan, an interesting thing, would not look at Airbnb and Uber ideas as creative in giving innovation grants, because they say, well, there's nothing new. The programming and the idea of using GPS and databases, people have done that before. But we now know that's incredibly, and I've worked with the Taiwan government to accept that these kind of ideas, a radical business model that works and provides a radically different user experience, that's a big innovation, except we now call it combinatorial innovation. That's a term that came from the chief economist at Google. We first used that word. And so and it's all about creating a user experience and a business model that works with it. We introduced things like dicey, deep, indulgent, complete, elegant, and emotional or evocative, terms that the gurus at Apple, like Guy Kawasaki, used to create what they call a delightful experience, and then how a business model has been developed on this. We look at how, for example, the iPod was originally a piece of hardware, then they added a tremendous amount of software emphasis to it, and then they added partners like the record companies, so there'd be a ready legal source of the music to play on it. It became a complete product. Remember, I said dicey is deep, indulgent, complete, elegant, and evocative. That's an example of thing. DataCube Max Video Circuit Board example is the one I just gave you, where we're putting these black handles and suddenly we can sell it for $1,000 more to these robot companies with the same functionality, same technical benefits that you get from someone else's board that does rapid parallel processing of video data. And we learn about whole ways people rethink what a business is going to be, who it's for, all those sort of things. I'm going to skip, and we look at making changes, analyzing things in terms of their business model. Like, for example, when the iPod, and I use that as a great example, it's where Apple changed from being a hardware to a modern software company at that moment in time, and to a company that thinks in terms of multiple revenue sources. When they added iTunes, they suddenly were making money from hardware and software. And the iTunes also included cool apps that you could use on the smartphone, all those sort of things. We later look at Spotify and the whole idea that not only do you have to make a perfect business model by what's called lean startup, which is make something, test it, make changes, pivot, to seeing that even companies that do it perfectly, life changes. So we look at Spotify, which did everything right, had a successful business model in 2008, 2009. The world changed, Apple copied them, and Apple has the power of an ecosystem company to lower prices as much as they want, because Apple has other agenda for getting you, or YouTube now, for getting you into their system. They make money on you from advertising or hardware in the case of Apple. So you have different competitors with different, sometimes competitors who don't have to make money on your specific thing. Sometimes things change, like the free part of the freemium model, the free part of Spotify. They were making money on the advertising, but then advertising rates have dropped just like this in the last 10 years. Just talk to any newspaper with the problems they've had to face. And the last thing in the course, the last case we really get into is the whole new style of companies. I think we can learn a lot from China. China has two things that made it create all sorts of crazy new business models, new styles in company. We look at how Deng Xiaoping opened up China to trade zones and to create capitalism in various free trade zones, that immediately companies came in there, some from Taiwan, some from China, and we're just using it to make stuff cheap, to be an outsourcing place for Europe and for high-priced places in Europe and the Americas. And those people generally they did that, then they started to get into Shanzai, which is how to quickly make a kind of fake copy of iPhones or smartphones or even cheap Motorola phones. And they were driven by, but in the process, Shanzai literally means mountain bandit, because you learn a lot of creative skills when you're copycatting. You have to, because someone else makes, you make a copycat phone, and then someone else makes one that has 2 SIM cards, so they can have a separate line for their mother can call on, or their family, or somebody puts a phone in a very cute package that looks like a cigarette case, so someone else quickly copies that. So people learn to be fast, flat organizational change, fast and easy to make decisions, and that made it easy. So that's why Shanzai people were called mountain bandits. They quickly did, a mountain bandit quickly does something and then changes to go somewhere else before he's caught. From that, it led to creative copying, and to now incredible companies like Xiaomi, like DJI, which is the world's leading robot company. One of the things we look at is also what was going on in China is all the social media companies trying to put a great wall, an internet wall around that. So I guess they were worried about political disruption from people talking about Tiananmen and things like that. But the result of that was, for 10 years, Chinese companies were totally isolated from the outside social media companies. And just like in Australia and Madagascar, all sorts of crazy different animals have developed because they were shut off from development. Marsupials, kangaroos, crazy lemurs, things like that. Giant animals developed, much bigger than the existing. All the problems of when you're cut off in an animal, the things that happen biologically when you're cut off geographically, happened where you got things like the large networks that and different business models that places like Tencent, which owns WeChat and QQ, and a financial mechanism, so you could keep somebody in that system and make money not by charging a subscription, but through in-game fees, through micropayments, through use of their financial services, to arrange somebody to come by and throw a party at your house and cater a party at your house spontaneously at 11 at night, or to have your a van pull up and cut your dog's hair, all through and the same thing, all these companies, the social media companies, Alibaba, others, developed completely differently than, and so there's a lot of interesting business models, different ways of doing things. Xiaomi, instead of the founder of Xiaomi, Li Jun, who I've actually gotten to meet in my interviews in China, interesting guy who said when he put it together, he said Steve Jobs was a hero of his growing up, but he knew that he couldn't have a model. He said, I'm not as smart as Steve Jobs. I can't predict the future like he does. I need another input. So he designed it to get a lot of input, both from below, not all from the top, and also from their fans. So the fans of Xiaomi are constantly changing Xiaomi. And we discussed in class, of course, should Apple be worried that all these companies are getting cheaper and picking up maybe 50%, 60%, 70% of the functionality of an iPhone, and yet 1/4 the price? It's sometimes, should Apple be worried that small changes it's making are not enough, and people are going to finally say, that's nice, but 1/4 the price, like loyalty only goes so far. I can do some of this, or I can stop and take questions that I was going to go into, and we'll furnish you, by the way, we're going to furnish you with a copy of these slides for your interest. Afterwards, I spoke with Vadim, and he can send you a copy of this. So some of the stuff, I'm just going to, we look at at partnerships, for example, the idea has been around for a long time. That's a picture of a few years back, my 4-year-old son. This was his lunchbox. What made this lunchbox valuable, of course, was not its inner mechanics or it's not its high-tech plastic or whatever. It's just the lunchbox, but it has the minions on them, which every 4-year-old was crazy about at the time. That's adding value. We need to drop any presumptions that only if it took $1 million of research or $1 billion of research is it more valuable. We saw certainly saw with Eli Lilly, they had the whole market stolen with them. They're disrupted by a simple pen that you could pre-measure the amounts, and that rather than trying to figure out in the middle of the day how much your dosage and everything like that. That was probably, I don't know what their competitor, Novo Nordisk, that was their European, probably only cost them a few $100,000, maybe $1 million to develop. It probably only cost Eli Lilly when they developed it and then didn't release it in America a few $1 million as opposed to 700 million, but it was profoundly disruptive. So be aware of that. In the slides, I won't go the allure of partnerships, why people use partnerships in so many ways, all the ways you can get into trouble. The sharing economy, as I mentioned, the big theory is it's going to be better unit economics, but it isn't always true. So we talked through that, and you can see I really these days talk a lot about it because so many of my graduates are starting or joining companies, even insurance companies and traditional companies, banks, which are trying to say, how can we do this as a sharing? How can we give, or I've been working with a with an adhesives company an adhesives and chemicals company in China, which decided, gee, we'll start a subsidiary that is a platform for that all consumers can come from, and even our competitors will advertise, and this will be a platform that helps direct people into whatever product is right for them, and they make money on those connections as opposed to their prior model, which was making money on only sales of their products. So people are thinking a lot about these things now. And as I say, there's a right way and a wrong way, and one needs to, we're learning now. This is a hot area, one of my research specialties, because you can learn so much. This is what we would have showed. We would have showed how cool Airbnb, and you can use those sites later. Click on them. We can look at how Airbnb is, how great it is, the power. We can look at what a mess it is. And then we can look at what some lawyers are telling us. Oh, I guess we don't have that on here. It stopped presenting. But we can use that. Well, we can use very quickly. Vadim, I'll be right with you to take the questions. We can look right with, you'll see how there are lawyers still telling Airbnb and Uber to act like Craigslist and take no responsibility at all. In fact, their contract says we're purely a connector. We take no responsibility if your vendor, like your car driver or your apartment owner, really does something horrible, or the person staying at your house does something terrible. Well, you can't do that. That's a bad move. Win a few $100,000 in lawsuits, lose tens of billions of dollars in the value of your stock and the power of your brand. So, Vadim, where would you like me to go here?
You can just click to the next slide.
Okay. Okay, and I guess the next slide we were watching, that was a video about an incredible mess. So, okay, and here's this incredible Airbnb. I'm focusing. I don't know if you can see my cursor. Can you see it says, oh, sorry, one back. That's a slide from Airbnb. In the middle paragraph, it says Airbnb's contract says website says Airbnb has no control over the conduct of hosts and disclaims all reliability. And then you got a lawyer there telling them the more they're like a bulletin board or old-fashioned matchmaking service and the word Craigslist, the better off they are. And we look at, that's a somewhat leading question. We say, do you think this is good advice? And in the regular class, people end up saying, hell no. Even though it sounded like you're going to save a lot, you're going to save money on lawsuits. Big deal, as we say. It's not, it misses some of the bigger things. So that's a little range. We start to look how does, a bigger way of thinking at things than just, and realizing that if you make sharing economies, you are by, they may not economically be right, or even a platform economy, but you have enormous responsibilities for quality control, whether it's quickly reimbursing people and not arguing with them if a tree falls on them, and on someone who stayed at an Airbnb, or in this case, the one I showed you before, a tree fell on somebody's father, a big tree fell on the apartment and killed him. And Airbnb is trying to say, well, that's not our responsibility, but we'll look into it. We have a policy, we'll give you $50,000. And the person was horrified that Airbnb, which inspects things to make sure the tree looks good and the apartment looks good and take photographs, never looked at the fact that this was going to kill somebody. So that's a learning, that's a pretty dramatic learning, but and we also get to look at these companies these new companies which have blown off, like Airbnb said, we're not going to be, Uber said, we're not going to pay taxes, we're not going to fingerprint our drivers, things like that. And Airbnb, which initially said, no, we don't need to be inspected like hotels do, and then found out that had really made the health departments very angry because they live to inspect things, and likewise paying taxes, that people are realizing that if there's a stakeholder out there, you got to figure out how to make your peace with them. My last line there says, remember, you don't get to pick your stakeholders. So you may not think the public health department is your stakeholders, but if they can stop things, they are. Or your competitors. If taxi cab owners who have paid a lot of money for the rights don't like you, they'll find every reason to go to the authorities and say, stop these bad people, Uber. So again, those are some of the big themes we look at in a course. I think that's it. Here's an example. We go into a course, we look at how, for this washing company, this guest speaker I bring in, I plan to bring guest speakers in, I bring them in remotely. That's the wonder of internet that the team is taking advantage of, and the university is taking advantage of, is that you'll be able to, so this was one slide he showed, and you can see here that when they did it fully outsourced, they lost money. You can't make money on a profit margin that's only 29%, a gross profit margin. Very hard. Whereas if it's fully insourced, you get better quality and but the economics is better. So that's just an example. Let's, Vadim, would you like me to just take a few questions now? I'm willing to stay if your audiences, I don't know how many audience you have, of course, because it's we're still working out how to use the system.
We have 64 people now, and there are two questions. Roman is asking, Professor, what do you think about using Jung's topology as a system for defining and managing talents?
For using which system?
Jung's topology. I'm not sure if it's related to our today's innovation class, but
I'm not sure what John's topology is, but I think any of these systems are good. Some of them are used. Many companies will have people do an interview or take a questionnaire so they can see if they're right for that company. For example, if you want someone who's resistant to change, that's not a very good person to bring into a company, a startup that's going to rapidly have to change things. Whether you're at Uber, Airbnb, Washloft, from month to month, they're pivoting, they're changing their business model because, and so that's I think, so that's an example where using a topology, make sure you get the right people in a company, absolutely. Or if you're picking salespeople, there are salespeople we call order takers. They're very organized and everything like that, but they're no good at making the first sales. They're no good at taking a new idea and having to educate, consultatively that, so you can pick the right salespeople. I know a lot of startups that use that. So I'm sorry, but I didn't catch your first name, but your who was that?
It was Roman.
Roman, and talking about John's topology. So yes, whatever topology, I think that's an important part of implementing innovation, getting the right people. I didn't talk a lot here, but one of the clear facts that's in the course is that big companies and sometimes the people within them are such deadheads that the only way to change, it's going to be very hard to change. Kodak was an extremely hierarchical organization. That meant it had you couldn't talk to anybody at your level without going up and down the thing. The managers were extremely arrogant. They we say in America that they were born on third base, i.e. the company was already 100 years old when they took over in the 1960s. That's one of the oldest companies in the world, Kodak. And they were executives, but they thought they created the company. So we say they were born on third base, but thought they hit a triple. That's an American baseball joke. We say that about politicians who were born wealthy and talk about how much they created and say, hey, your father was rich already. So we look at that Kodak. Eli Lilly was also had a wrong organizational structure as well as people. Their organizational structure was all pure functionally, so they never heard, and they had no contact with their salespeople who were finding out what customers really wanted. So people, and that's what I call value network, play a huge thing. And some people, you'll see in some of the success stories, one of the things they did is brought people in from the outside. As one of my students said to me, if you want to think outside the box, sometimes you have to bring in people from outside the box. Nintendo, very successful, not Nintendo, Docomo, which was a huge success story, one of the first smartphone-like companies, but at a much lower bandwidth. It was a communicator. It inspired all the later companies. It was an old, grumpy Japanese company called a utility company. You might have a few like this in Russia. That was, an old-fashioned NTT, National Telephone, government-owned utility company, just selling phones and making phones. And when they decided to go into a product called Docomo, that would be for a different audience and would use leftover things that was designed to be a low bandwidth thing for a younger audience, because they realized it didn't have enough bandwidth to satisfy business executives. So they hired in a young 22-year-old internet entrepreneur, one of the first ones. This was in the late 90s. And they hired in, this was an all-male organization, they hired in a woman who was in her 30s and was the publisher of a magazine for teenage girls in Japan. Again, they had to start thinking differently, a much different sense that what people understand in young girls, and they'd like to get horoscopes in young people, and they would like, it's more what they can get on the phone than the technical quality. And they built a very successful business model. Again, I think that was a really great question, Roman, because it emphasized what I especially do in the first part of the course, is that before you start doing anything, figure out if you're organized correctly and if you have the right people to pull off an innovation, because that's hugely important. I'm sorry, next question.
Professor, there is another teacher from Russia who's thanking you for the presentation, and she or he is asking, what are the most essential skills for graduates in 21st century, and which was not presented in 20th century?
Yeah, I think I think the most important skills, and this goes to different companies, educational systems. Many educational systems, even in the United States, certainly in China, Taiwan, where I've done a lot of consulting, Japan, I don't know as much about Russia, but many educational systems, both in college and high school, have people memorize things and then repeat it in exams. In my courses and in many of the courses now they're experimenting with in Taiwan, you're less graded on your ability to repeat what was in the reading you had, like a case, or you don't want to say, if I show you a 13-minute Keurig video, you don't want to repeat what you saw in the video. You want to begin to say, well, what problems did they solve? And what did I think of that? What's my own reaction? And what would I do differently? So the skills of being able to not just repeat something, but kind of forcefully analyze it, see how I can put that into, like forcefully analyzing the Hewlett-Packard case or the HP case and say, here's a culture that killed ideas and an organizational chart that kills ideas, and here's the problem, and here's how it manifested in the organization, that they couldn't get this type of information about what their customers wanted. They couldn't, in the case of Eli Lilly, or in the case of Hewlett-Packard, they're with their little Kitty Hawk little mini hard drive that was only 1.5 inches. They couldn't even have conversations with the customers that showed an immediate interest because they were so scared by their corporate culture that they only could talk to huge customers that were less uncertain and eventually didn't come through. That were dependent. For example, the first little personal digital assistants never sold because they didn't work very well. This was in the early 90s. But whereas Nintendo immediately wanted to buy millions of dollars of stuff with them, but they weren't big enough. They weren't talking about 200 million a year, things like that. And there was a Japanese language translation that wanted to do things, and they became, and also they were too concerned with profit. The Nintendo thing said, we've got to buy these units for $50, not $250. We don't care if you make them cheaper, if you don't provide drop resistance. We don't care if somebody drops one out the window. They'll buy another cassette. They'll buy another game device from us. In fact, we hope they drop it out windows from 2 stories when they're drunk, because we'll get more. So they instead focused on the wrong things, fancy drop resistance, things like that. Well, and what a student would do is then say, wow, they did all these things wrong, and here's why they did it wrong. Here's how the concept of culture, value, network, expectations, and the problems of the concept of the problems of a new market, of a new product establishing some niche as it's, because they didn't have that much memory, finding some niche that was good enough, how they were blinded by the culture. And then the student would say, okay, here's all the ways I would negotiate XYZ on a deal. I'd get a deal from Nintendo. I would quit the work we're doing in drop resistance for a cool product that had no immediate customers anyway. Instead, we'll focus entirely on how to make the product cheaper through cost engineering. So in each case, they would, whether it's I think that's the skill. To the professor I'm speaking to, we need to have in our courses a lot more case studies. We need to be creative about case studies. They can be a guest speaker talking about the problems. Whenever I have guest speakers, I try not to use people who are very successful and did it 20 years ago. I try to use guest speakers who are right in the middle of their struggle, because it's much more compelling to students. They even ask, what do you think I should do? Those are, I call them live case studies. I show a brief video. I show I often will show the problems that Airbnb and Uber are having right now and say, what do you think? What concepts apply and what can we do? So I think that's the biggest skill, being able to critically analyze. They call that critical thinking, and to do a lot more in our courses than memorization. That, to me, I could talk a lot more, but just for brevity, I'll say that's the single most thing. And that goes to, and believe it or not, it's very hard. For example, the president of the MIT of Taiwan, who then became vice minister of the Ministry of Science and Technology for Taiwan, a brilliant man, he tried to change the public school systems, grades 1 through 12. He said, let's start there and do things where kids talk about their feelings, what are their reactions to things, learn about the design process of coming up with solutions, whether it's playing with blocks in first and second grade, or doing projects, team projects for outside consulting for, let's say, finding a media site that a hospital started and try to help them with their Facebook site and their social media, all those kinds of skills. He found that the public school teachers and their unions, unfortunately, resisted any change. You had a teacher who had used the same set of yellow notes for 20 years and has tenure, say a teacher of 11, 12-year-olds, said, I don't want to use this. I want to keep doing the same types of memorization exams. I hope that answer is useful for all. But Dean, tell me if I'm talking too long, and I will just go on to the next question.
The questions are finished. So, Professor, your overview lecture was excellent, as always, and our participants showed a huge interest during the session, and now we can measure their interest with new technologies. So if you let me, I just finish our session with some words in Russian, just engaging our prospective students to take your class.
Okay, and we'll make available in PDF the slides.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I will explain this to them.
Thank you.
Надеюсь, что всем присутствующим лекция оказалась как минимум полезной, поэтому мы будем рады поделиться с вами PDF-файлом этого документа, этой лекции. Всем, кому интересно, вы можете оставлять вопрос со своим имейлом, и мы пришлем лекцию вам на почту. Мы пока выбираем дату начала этого курса профессора Берри Янгера. Предположительная дата начала 24 сентября. Стоимость обучения у нас в университете очень низкая, в разы ниже, чем предлагают американские университеты. Оплата может происходить в рассрочку, помесячно. И это онлайн-курс, 7-недельный формат. Будут представлены онлайн-дискуссии, разработка вашей дорожной карты, конкретно ваших проектов. Поэтому всем, кому интересно, оставляйте заявки на нашем сайте. Мы с вами свяжемся для дальнейшего предоставления дополнительной информации по курсам. So, Professor, thank you so much for your time. It was a wonderful session. You brought many interesting topics and lots of different concepts that are really not really presented in the Russian literature. So I hope many of our participants were very happy to hear all these things that you just presented.
May I say to everyone also that we're trying to use can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, I can hear everybody.
That we're trying to use many of the modern innovation processes in developing the programs of our RAU, that we're trying different things, then seeing what works, what doesn't work, using new technologies, but finding out more about students, what works best, synchronous, asynchronous. We could do like a class where, just like this, but where people could ask their questions directly and it would be translated to me. We're trying all sorts of different things to find out, and realizing that there are many different types of needs here. As we said, some people want to come to US for some of their education. Some people want to, once a year, get an experience in the US, meeting key players. Some people want to do it all from Russia. We're looking at all the different ways, realizing that many people, even age, whether somebody some people are younger and can come to meetings. some people need to stay in their jobs, sometimes at a different age. So we're learning, we're having to do a lot of learning. We're using a ground up process here of innovation, sort of, as the saying goes in America, we're eating our own dog food. I don't know if that
Sounds
translates.
Great.
Well.
Sounds great. So at this point, we probably should finish the session. Hope everybody was happy with the presentation, and have a good evening to everybody.
Thank you all, and thank you, Dr. Vadim, as well.
Thank you, Professor. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.